Storytelling. In this chapter, we're going to talk about how storytelling can help language growth, teacher techniques in storytelling, the ability to create a story that meets suggested criteria, and promotion of child-created stories. Storytelling is a way that you can help children increase their language enjoyment. Storytelling is something that's been going on since the beginning of people, right? So this is a way that people passed on information, customs, wisdom, songs, legends, etc. Some people find storytelling intimidating as opposed to reading a book. But let's think about how we can incorporate storytelling in ways that are comfortable for you and work for kids. So, what do kids understand when you are telling a story? They notice the beginning, the middle, and the end, right? Once upon a time, and then the end, right? Often in storytelling, you have more animated facial expressions, gesturing, right? So that's an important part of storytelling. It helps build imagination, creativity, and thinking skills. So one way to do this is to start with something, you're in group time, for instance, with a bunch of preschoolers. Yesterday, on my way home from work, I stopped at the grocery store. And in the parking lot at the grocery store, there was a dog. And I wondered, why is this dog in the parking lot? I wonder where his family is. I wonder how he got here. What do you think happened? Why do you think that dog was there? I wondered what his name was. So we're all working on a story together, right? So somebody says, well, maybe he jumped out of his car. Maybe his name is Popcorn, right? So maybe someone says to you, what did the dog look like? Well, he was white and fluffy. So then we say, well, so yesterday on my way home from work, I stopped at the grocery store and I saw a white fluffy dog in the parking lot. And I thought maybe he had jumped out of a car. And then I saw a lady yelling, popcorn, popcorn. And I knew that that was his owner and she had come to find him. So it's personal, it's dramatic because you don't know what's going to happen with the dog, right? We're talking about, places that kids understand and know about. The grocery store. Every kid's been to the grocery store. Every kid knows a dog, right? So this is not like some fantastical, complete story that you've come up with or some story that you've memorized to tell the children. This is you talking about something in your life that they can relate to and then expanding on it together. And then maybe after you're done with group time and you've finished the story of Popcorn, you say, hey, does anybody want to draw a picture of Popcorn and we can write down this story? And then you make a book out of it, right? So, and then the next day you say, hey, Ella, what did you do last night? And Ella can tell you a story about what she did last night. Well, I helped my dad milk the cows. And then I took a bath. And then my sisters and I ran around the yard. And then we went to bed. So storytelling doesn't have to be a story. It can be a reflection of what you've done or something that's happened to you or, right? And, once you've got that story figured out, then you can make it into a once upon a time story if you want. Once upon a time, I was at the grocery store in the parking lot and I saw a dog running around whose name was Popcorn, or I saw a white fluffy dog running around. And I wondered where the dog came from. And then I heard a lady calling popcorn, popcorn, and the dog went to her and she hugged him and they were so happy to see each other. The end. A teacher's voice is important, can increase drama in the story, right? So I didn't know what was going to happen with this dog in the parking lot. So these are ways that you can engage in storytelling with your kids, right? You can also use picture books. One thing that you can do is use a picture book, and I don't know if I have, hold on. Okay. A book that doesn't have words or doesn't have a specific story, but you can make up a story that goes along with the pictures in the book. This one, I thought this didn't have words really, but it does. But you can still, you can show kids a picture and say, what do you think is happening? Can we make up a story about this picture? It doesn't even have to be a book. It can be an actual picture, a photograph of something, or a piece of art. So let's see. This is a book of fairy tales, but it has really good pictures in it, and you can just find some pictures and talk about what you think is happening and make up a story about the pictures. Or you can take pictures from books, right, and make sequence cards out of them. So take a book that has, a bunch of pages. Let's see if I can find a better example. Well, I can't really find one right now. Okay, pancakes for breakfast. This has pictures, right? It's got a lot of pictures of what's happening and not words. So we can make up a story about what's happening. You can just find a bunch of random pictures and put them together and make a story. Okay? Story songs are very good. Using multicultural materials, right? Finding a lot of things that are from cultures other than yours and including them in your process. Storybook discussions talk about the sequence of the story events. What happened in the story? Talk about the characters. Why do you think that? So Max and Ruby are going to go find a present for Grandma, and they have a little bit of money, but Max keeps wanting to spend it on other things. Why do you think Max wanted to do that? Why do you think Max, bought all that stuff? Why do you think that happened, right? Talking about what the characters are doing, talking about the setting of the story. Do you think, so Max and Ruby ride on a bus. Do you think Max and Ruby lived in a city, or they live in the country, or where do you think they lived? How come they were riding on a bus? Character speech. In Max and Ruby books, if you know Max and Ruby at all, Ruby is constantly telling Max what to do. She's very bossy. What's the high point of the story? What happened? So talking through what's happening in the book and picking out those specific things. Appropriate selections for stories. Make sure that it's appropriate for their age level. Make sure the plot and the style and the values match up with what they're interested in and what they have experience with. Memorable characters, sensory and visual images. Is it truthful? Is it suspenseful? Does it respect children's intellectual abilities, right? The worst thing is a book that is sort of dumbed down for kids, and kids don't like that. Or a story. And when you tell this story, when you work with kids, are you enthusiastic about it? If it's not a book or a story that you're interested in, they're going to know. My kids used to love this one Clifford book, and I finally donated it to the library because I did not want to read it one more time. It was terribly written. It wasn't interesting to me. It was hard for me to read out loud. They had some Barbie books that were the same way. They loved them because they loved to look at the Barbie pictures or whatever, but I couldn't stand reading them. They were terrible. I just gave them away. A fable is a story in which generally animals point out lessons, right? The tortoise and the hare, right? A participation story is one where you involve them. They're doing something. They might be acting it out. They might be using puppets or props or pictures. Okay, classic tales and whatever. Sometimes you might want to memorize certain parts of a story or write parts on cards. You do whatever you can do to help them understand and to help them be engaged and interested, right? Sometimes it's like using a book and telling the story in your own words. That goes fine with people who can't read yet and have no like word or letter recognition ability. Now, when they get to old enough to read the story themselves, they're going to have some surprises. Using gestures, like I said, when Silly Sally went to town walking backwards upside down, okay? So how are we going to show walking backwards upside down? Maybe you're standing up and reading it and walking backwards. When we read it in my 3-year-old class, we all tried to walk backwards upside down. It was kind of a nightmare, but it made an impression on them. Involve the children. Have them be part of the story. A good teacher story has an audience, involves the audience, has good content, has some motivation to do something, and timing, like you're not just reading it, and semiotics is the symbolism of it. Okay. Child-created stories. A monologue is when a child tells you a story on his own. Exposure to stories helps children develop their own stories, and teacher storytelling and child authorship go hand in hand. So what you want to do is have, like I said earlier, in group time, when you're talking about, I saw a dog in the parking lot, right? How can a child make that into a book? Child-created stories. It's very important that children and you understand what the story is about. So what is this story about? What are we talking about here? Story and story map, like mapping out the story. What are the key things that are happening in this story? Story sequence cards. So you might have a set of illustrations from a story, and you can help children put them in the right order, or put them in a different order and have them tell you what happened in the story. One of my favorite things is to read The Snowy Day, and to read it backwards, because the way it ends reflects the way it starts. And so to think about, he woke up in the morning and the snow wasn't there, but then he went outside and played some more. If you're not familiar with The Snowy Day, I don't know if I have it here. I have some of my books at school and some of my books here. Anyway, The Snowy Day by Ezra Jack Keats, one of my absolute favorite of all time children's books. Okay. Focus on reaching reluctant storytellers. Sometimes you have children who aren't interested in telling a story, putting together a story. A lot of times what you need to do with that is spend some one-on-one time having a conversation. Just talk and listen. And that's where you can engage those children. Limited English speakers. How do we work on stories with them? Well, one thing we can do is use both English and their native language, have them use pictures and props, acting out things. It's about the communication, so it doesn't necessarily need to focus on the words that you use. It's the way you get the idea across. Other storytellers. Many are excited about sharing stories with children. It's a great way to promote diversity. Like, a lot of stories are focused on old cultural tales, folk tales. It's a great way to promote diversity. Having people come into your classroom to tell stories is great, because there are a lot of storytellers who develop stories and work on how to present them. And it's a professional thing. Like, they know really how to do it. So there you go. A little bit about stories. And when we talk about stories in this way, we're talking about both the stories that we tell and the stories that are included in books and the stories that children make up. So stories are an important part of developing language and literacy skills.